Where?
No!
Just so you know, this isn't personal.
From legendary performances to guys that just scared the crap out of you, join me as I reveal to you the best villains of the decade. 9. Malcolm Marilyn.
You got something?
Just a lot of suicidal ghosts.
Yeah, and where's that leave us?
Nowhere.
Honestly, Oliver, this place is even easier to break into than your last lair.
Malcolm! When it came to the Arrowverse, nothing would have happened if it wasn't for the first season succeeding. And while it's true that Season 2, featuring fellow great bad guy Deathstroke, was the series' high point in many ways, Season 1 proved that if you still to comics lore, you can still have a great result, even if the villain isn't a big name, and that's where Malcolm Marilyn came in. Played by the incredible John Barrowman, Malcolm was known as the Dark Archer, and throughout Season 1, you thought he was just a rich, pompous fool, when instead, he was the bad guy behind everything involving the Undertaking. What was the Undertaking? Oh, nothing much. Just a plan to level half of the city that ended up killing his wife using an earthquake machine. What made Marilyn so intimidating was that not only was he Oliver Queen's equal in many ways, he was no fool. He knew there was a chance that he could lose, so he made 2 of the earthquake machines to ensure that he still won. Not to mention, he faked his own death and was a major player in Arrow up until Season 5 when he finally died, but not before being a major villain in Legends of Tomorrow. So, as you can see, Marilyn had staying power. 8. The Governor.
They killed my boy! We're going back!
We are not soldiers. Want us to kill miners? Of course, but this is crazy. Let's go home. Are you gonna be safe?
There are many villains in the world of The Walking Dead. Some are physical threats, some are sneaky cunning strategists, and some are arguably just plain evil. And many of these things led to first main villain of the series, the Governor. The Governor in both the comics and the AMC show was the first real test of Rick and his followers. The Governor seemed nice on the outside, but he was much darker than he would ever admit. What made him tick was pure anger, especially after Rick's family cost him his own via his Walker daughter. The Governor was an unhinged man, even killing his own forces after they failed to take down Rick. And to this day, one of the most striking images of the Governor is when he found a tank he could use. Yeah, that's intimidating. Yet leave it to creator Robert Kirkman to try and show that even the villains can be redeemable. The Governor tried to be better, but his darkness led him to one last attack on Rick, causing them to leave the prison that they were holed up in. The Governor died, but he technically won in the end. 7. Hydra.
Anytime, boys. Hail Hydra.
Hail Hydra!
Usually I wouldn't cast such a wide net here, but when it comes to Hydra in the MCU and beyond, they're more than just one villain. They're a group that's caused a lot of pain to people. When they were revealed in Captain America: The Winter Soldier, they showed the world that they had been operating under their noses for decades and had secretly committed atrocities to get more power. And their reach was everywhere, including the Senate and S.H.I.E.L.D. itself. And even though they fell in Winter Soldier, their presence lived on in Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., where multiple characters carried on the name and brought all sorts of trouble. Grant Ward was the best among them in our opinion, as he endured no matter what happened to him, even being possessed by the god that inspired Hydra to form. Not to mention, it was Hydra that created Scarlet Witch and Quicksilver. And while they were Avengers in the end, they helped create Ultron, who killed millions. So yeah, when it comes to being pure evil and not caring about anything but your goals, hail Hydra. 6. Todd Alquist.
And Uncle Jack, he was out here with those feds. He had to have told them some stuff that might not be too good for us. And I bet we could get it out of him back home. I mean, I could do it.
There are 2 entries from Breaking Bad on this list. And when you really talk about the show, there are a lot of ways you could talk about the villains, and which one is the worst. For some, especially in light of the epilogue movie El Camino, the young Todd Alquist is the worst of the bunch. Which is hilarious, because when you think of the bad guys, you usually think of the over-the-top Tuco or Gus Fring. But Todd was just as evil as them both, because he honestly didn't care about killing people, and he had a weird way of justifying it. He was part of the neo-Nazi group that occasionally helped out Walter White, and Todd was never afraid of doing what it took to get the job done. It started out simple enough, but then in a critical episode, he killed a kid on a bike just for witnessing what they were doing. He pulled the trigger without a second thought. Later, when Jesse was kidnapped by his uncle and he refused to cook, Todd took Jesse to his girlfriend's house and made him watch as he killed her, noting, "It's not personal." Clearly. Todd was so quiet, so unsuspecting. You never felt he would do anything bad, until he did, and did it again and again. And that's why many consider him the best villain of the bunch. 5. Kilgrave.
All right, yes! That was absolutely tremendous. I thought I was good. You are a sight to behold. Isn't she amazing? Yeah? You bore me. Leave. Go on.
Jessica. Yeah, it didn't take us long to get back to the Marvel villains. And in the case of Kilgrave, this was equal parts menace, power, and unnerving resolve. Played by David Tennant, the former Doctor Who, Kilgrave was a man in love with the hero Jessica Jones, which was fine, except that his superpower made it that his spoken word became action. He would have anyone do anything he wanted on his word alone, including basically making Jessica his slave. She eventually broke free and thought he was dead via an accident. Oh boy, was she wrong. Throughout the first season, we saw just how brutal, how cunning, how clever, and how downright evil Kilgrave was. He did everything just to get Jessica back in his clutches. He got a girl to kill her parents. He brainwashed Luke Cage. He got over it with a shotgun to the head to fight Jessica. He got his own parents to kill themselves painfully. And that's still only scratching the surface of it all. What might make him the most diabolical is the fact that he really did love Jessica in his own twisted way. His elation in his final episode, when he thought Jessica was back in his control, was beautifully acted by Tennant. And though Jessica did kill him right afterward, his presence remained in her mind. A presence that would return for the next 2 seasons to remind her that he's never really gone. 4. Ernesto Dela Cruz.
Oh, I could never hate you. If you must go, then I'm sending you off with a toast. To our friendship. I would move heaven and earth for you, mi amigo. Salud!
Coco from Disney and Pixar is one of the more underrated films of their franchises, but it's one that had a "you didn't see this coming" moment in the form of Ernesto Dela Cruz. Long story short, our young hero Miguel traveled to the land of the dead to find his believed grandfather in order to return home safely. That grandfather was believed to be the famed singer and songwriter Ernesto Dela Cruz, a man who had won the hearts of the living and the dead alike. However, while we were taken by Ernesto's charm, the truth eventually revealed itself. Miguel's real grandfather was Ernesto's former singing partner, whom he killed in order to get his songs and continue on with his music career, which propelled him to fame. And this act was also the reason that Miguel's family hated music, because they thought the grandfather had abandoned them, when in fact, he was trying to leave music to get back to them. Ernesto got his in the end, and the truth of Miguel's family healed a lot of wounds after the shock had resolved itself. 3. Ramsay Bolton.
So let's play a game. Which body part do you need the least?
In Game of Thrones, there are a few villains that rise above the rest, but in terms of pure evil and sadism, Ramsay Bolton rises above most of them. We met him early on in Game of Thrones via his father, but as Ramsay came into his own, we realized just how sick this guy was. He tortured Theon Greyjoy to such an extent that he basically took over his mind, and took off his manhood, just saying. He killed his own father, his own stepmother, and her just-born child. He fed people to dogs just because he wanted to. He killed Rickon Stark to goad Jon Snow into a fight, and he violated Sansa Stark because he could in his mind. when Sansa got her revenge by feeding him to his own dogs. Well, let's just say she wasn't the only one smiling as the deed was done. 2. Gus.
It was just you and Joaquin. He was the only family you had left. Now, the Salamanca name dies with you.
What made Breaking Bad so good in the eyes of many was the compelling and very layered villains, and Gus Fring was the embodiment of that in many ways. When he was introduced to Walter White and Jesse Pinkman, he was to be their distributor, and then eventually they worked for him in the biggest of ways. But as time went on, his layers began to show. We saw how ruthless he was. He used Jesse to lead a raid into Mexico to kill his arch rivals. He killed several of his own men without so much as saying a word to them. He was sadistic and liked to torture the man who killed his lover. Look at me, Hector. And he did it all while making himself look like a saint in the eyes of the police, the DEA, and more. And he was such a boss that when he got blown up with half his face gone, he still found time to straighten up his suit and time in order to look good before he died. What a boss. Speaking of which, number 1, Kingpin.
We on the same page?
No. I don't think we are.
Not unlike Malcolm, Marilyn, and Arrow. When Daredevil came to Netflix, it needed a villain to truly show where the series would go and beyond. And through that came Vincent D'Onofrio and his portrayal of Wilson Fisk, the Kingpin. A major player in the comics, this version of Kingpin started out a little more subtle, a little more reserved. He wasn't even in the first episode or 9/10 of the second. But when he emerged, his darkness was showing in all the right and horrifying ways. When he thought he had lost the love of his life in Vanessa, he went on a murder spree, including literally decapitating a man with a car door. When he was betrayed by one of his own men, he threw him down an elevator shaft. When he was trying to build up his empire, he paid off half the police force, senators, and more. And that was just the first season. In season 2, we saw him manipulate the Punisher so that he could be the king of the prison he was in. And in season 3, he did one of the deepest and most long-game plots in TV and movie history, in order to basically get himself exonerated and made the literal kingpin of New York City. And even Daredevil couldn't stop him without help. A lot of fans lament the fact that Daredevil didn't get a season 4 and beyond, just so that we could see more of Wilson Fisk. So, what do you think? What do you think of these villains who stole the shows or movies they were a part of? Which of these do you think was the best of the bunch? And which do you think could have been better? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe, and I'll see you next time on the channel.